Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, esteemed guests and industry experts. I hope you've had a great start to MWC so far. Welcome to our discussion on connectivity, commerce, accelerating global trade through mobile. According to the GSMA, there are over 5.2 billion unique mobile users worldwide, accounting for approximately 66% of the global population. This widespread adoption of mobile devices has transformed the way in which businesses operate and engage with consumers and other businesses, leading to a surge in mobile commerce transactions. Mobile and other emerging technologies, including AI, are empowering companies across a range of sectors and industries to tap into the vast potential of digital trade. In fact, it's estimated that by 2050, at least 50% of all trade will be digital in nature. That includes both goods and services. And there's no doubt that mobile sits at the heart of that as an enabler and a catalyst. Businesses are leveraging these technologies to unlock new revenue streams, enhance customer engagement, and expand their reach to global markets. And that's what this session is all about. And with that, let's now hear from our fantastic panelists sharing their perspectives on how emerging tech is playing a pivotal role in shaping commerce, driving innovation, and fostering economic growth. Thank you.
Thank you, Jamila. Now, I'd love to invite here, please find your seats. I think we'll try to match your faces, but I think people can recognize you. There we go. Well, starting from the side, David Boddington, the Group Product Manager for Digital Channels at Infobip. We have Alex Jenkins, the Executive Creative Director of Nexus Studios, as well as George Jijiashvili, from a Senior Principal Analyst for Games from Omdia. Big thanks and a big applause for all of them. I'm going to sit in the middle. Oh, no, that's fine.
I don't know.
It's a friendly thing. We don't. Well, I'm talking about all of that. Now, connectivity, commerce, creativity. You represent three different areas. And I would say three areas that have been impacted quite a bit by the different innovations and technology we've seen out there. I'm going to start with the one I would have to find a more difficult to describe right now, because Alex, Nexus Studios, at one point, I could have said that you are an animation studio. Right now, I don't know exactly how to describe you. Can you tell me what else you're doing and how technology has shaped your business a bit?
Sure. Is that coming through?
I think we can hear. Yeah.
Okay. Don't hear my echo. Yeah, it's correct. Nexus began as an animation and production house, but I work on the immersive department, and part of my job is to continually look at emerging technology and harness that as a way to drive creativity forward, build new experiences. So, we were looking on mobile, digital installations, and we've always harnessed technology to, shall we say, ask ourselves what the future of audience experience is. So it might be AR breaking the story off the screen and into the world around you. So we were very early on AR markers, and we actually did a forest trail from the children's book, The Gruffalo, and unpacked it into a forest. So if you know the Gruffalo, it involves a mouse that wanders through a forest. And then obviously since then we've been using visual positioning systems to do location-based experiences. So we worked with AT&T and Samsung in Dallas to do a massive sports experience there. And more recently, we worked with Gorillas to actually drop a music track. So that's quite interesting, because that was the first time a music track was released in that manner as actually an AR experience, which you would have to first experience on mobile. Then the music video is made off the back of that. So that's super interesting. And now, obviously, the AI is infusing all our work as well, and real-time techniques, etc. So gaming platforms is a good basis for making animations and stories upon as well, which allows us to be more reactive. So, innovative storytelling studio, perhaps?
Innovative storytelling. I would have probably attempted to use the word immersive, because you seem to be using technology to create completely
immersive is a good term. It's the name of my department.
That's it. And you have mixed 5G. We heard AR, the augmented reality, VR, and everything else coming in, and reproducing out of that new outcomes, as you just say, the video for the music and so on. Mm-hmm. So definitely, I get one business that is changing. David, At one point, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, InfoBip probably did not exist.
It did.
And I guess 5, 10 years ago, I wouldn't have put you down as the creative industry necessarily. But while we have immersive and experiences, you are now moving to, is it engagement? Where are you taking us with business messaging?
Yeah, I guess in general there's the blurring of the lines between creativity and execution. Very much so. We see that in terms of how conversations earlier just now in terms of the use of technology and AI to create content, which ultimately is coming from the delivery end of the ecosystem. So I think ultimately we would be an enabler. That might step into supporting the adaptation, the localization, the personalization of content to support the creative process. Or it may become a more commoditized creation of content, particularly if you're looking around SMS messaging and text-based messaging, for example.
So here we go. So you are becoming creative, and I guess AI is one of the big things we've been talking about. It's something you're using today right now.
For sure.
It is, and it's changing. You are now a creator of AI conversations and stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think AI, and again, it was, some of the points raised earlier today was straight out of my notes from, so to avoid kind of repeating too much. But I think that it has application in a number of different layers, certainly within our business, within kind of the messaging space. Starting point is really just about how it can augment and improve what we're currently doing, right? If you look at things such as fraud detection, AI detection, AIT detection, I should say, artificially inflated traffic, the ability of AI to detect bad actors within the space has come on absolutely significantly, and then that improves the trust of the ecosystem, and it allows then the more creative elements to engage and to use the ecosystem far more freely.
Well, let's move to George here. Now, you are an analyst.
Yes.
You are the expert here. You're talking. We can go back and talk about Omdia, which is a famous group, Informa, etc. But talking about games, now that's the one that 10, 20 years ago, when I was a bit younger, I knew it was there, still there. Has it been impacted by the technology as much, or are we still talking about relatively the same industry, or is it now a new industry?
No, it's completely different. So you're right about 20 years ago, and now if we look at console gaming in terms of the number of people who got consoles, it's more or less the same. We're looking at about 200 million odd consoles out there. So that category hasn't really grown in terms of numbers, but what has changed is the mobile technologies enabling billions of people to become gamers thanks to devices that we all own on smartphones. So this has been one way the technology has essentially democratized gaming in many ways and opened up gaming to places all around the world, not just the developed countries which had access to PlayStations and Nintendo consoles and so on. So that has been one really kind of palpable way that technology has changed the landscape of gaming. So today, before, game consoles was the games market, but now mobile gaming, in terms of revenues, is bigger than consoles and PC gaming combined.
No. And now, as you are the analyst, I need to try out a few more questions, because I just heard about AR, VR, the immersive world, AI, and much else in terms of technology as well. Are these new creative platforms also valid for games right now? Or is it still a bit of a minority thing happening on the sides?
So we'll look at immersive and VR first. So I've been looking at VR as an analyst for over 10 years now. So I've kind of been through this journey of kind of VR becoming to the forefront of it. Gaming has been the main thing that has been driving VR, let's face it, if you look at what Meta is doing. However, we know the number of users is still very low. It's about 20 million active installed base, so it's still very early days. Considering last year 1.1 billion smartphones were sold, 20 million VR headsets is a drop in the ocean in a sense. So VR, it's happening, it's having an impact, but it's still early days. And AI, only thing I would say about that, and we can talk about this, of course, hopefully a bit more, is having a big impact in things like how business of games is conducted and how games are made.
Okay, so great impact there on the mobility, on the access, and bringing it to everybody. Well, let's talk about mobile, as you mentioned it there, and I'll ask you as well. So, well, is a mobile technology helping? Is a mobile framework helping to build international platform? Is it easier to build something here and then sell it to another country once it's on a mobile area, app, service, etc.? I'll start with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with, I guess, strictly speaking, mobile was the first thing that enabled that international trade. If you look at developing markets, for example, the only connectivity, the only access to any sort of digital connection was via mobile. You look at mobile payments as well, enabling retail in those developing markets. So, the reality is it's the foundational kind of one of the foundational elements of trade, certainly cross-border internationally. If you want to reach into those markets, what we can say now is the kind of the globalization of platforms, the globalization of apps that exists right now, absolutely draws a common commodity across markets, for sure. So. Absolutely, I think mobile will only have a more significant role as we move forward.
Well, very true.
Can I add to that
George?
as well? Yeah, completely agree with David says in that it has definitely opened up borders in a sense that a game developer or an app developer anywhere in the world all of a sudden had access to hundreds of millions of potential users cross-border. But an important thing to highlight is that despite all this globalization and access to global users, still localization plays a huge role, and actually investing in the countries, in specific countries, is still extremely important. Because if we look at Tencent, for example, which is the largest and basically most profitable company in terms of apps, so it's the most kind of the highest grossing app maker in the world, it hasn't been able to kind of make a dent by itself in international markets outside of China, because their apps that have been super successful in China have seen no traction outside. So that's why they've been going around investing in Western companies, Western game developers, acquiring Western developers, and that's literally been the only way they've been able to make a dent internationally. So even though, yes, mobile has enabled the growth and access to global markets, investing in specific markets, it still remains important.
Interesting. It's like saying, well, we have all of these great platforms and technology, but it's culture as well you buy into, and how those culture kind of unites us as well, or in different groups of the world unites us.
I think you said that the globalization aspect has led to a desire for hyper-local experiences. And we're getting asked a lot of that recently. Actually, I won't talk about the project right now, but very much right now we're being asked how to harness AI in a creative manner so that we can take an experience that can be ran out globally, but in each local market, the AI helps do the local cultural nuances and what matters in the vicinity, which is a super interesting challenge. So you're actually building sort of frameworks and systems that you can be creative upon, but also make room for the technologies to maybe adapt some styling, come with a different voice, collect different pertinent information, which is hyper-local to that place, and still remain relevant as a way to do campaigns.
Well, here it is. While technology opens doors, immediately you then have to do something else to manage that people then want to introduce the localization elements. So you have to change a lot. This is not a business for people that like to stay still, it seems. Have your business changed dramatically because of these technologies? Well, I'll start with Dave. As your business model, for instance, is that still the same than it was 10 years ago, or technology has changed that?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think is any business model the same as it was 10 years ago? We'd probably say no. It has to adapt to the economic climate as much as the technological. But yes, absolutely, factoring in new technologies, the new ways of working, as well as the new products that are able to be delivered, absolutely has to change the business model, because looking at ourselves as a business, what we do now is very, very different from what we did 10 years ago. Our product stack, what our services that we're offering, absolutely has changed. We need to adapt accordingly. So yes, is that because of new technology? I would argue it's probably facilitated and influenced by rather than because of.
Okay. Alex, has the technology change here? I mean, we've also been through, probably, they will say, we've been through other things. There's been a pandemic, by the way. And then that itself generated a new approach to the technology itself. But has your business model then in this transformation from an animation studio to a much bigger...
No, absolutely. Like I say, we find new avenues to communicate with audience with the emerging technologies, so that kind of brings different departments, if you like, different specialities that have to be thought about. I mean, the core of the business, animation for the longest time and filmmaking is still at the heart of what we do. But actually, I would say right now, in these last few years, I think it'd be bold of me to say, but quite true, it's going to become a legacy business, because the very way we make that animation is just fundamentally changing. Like I say, we're using what were game platforms, real-time technologies to build animations within. So that long traditional process is now turned on its head, and animation directors can behave more like live-action directors, because they can change the lighting, they can change the scene, they can do it much faster speed. We can get more involved in the cultural conversation by being more reactive on social media and within hours posting new content and going along with how something unfolds, which we actually did again, just to mention the Gorillas. As they launched their campaign, they could actually now do reaction videos to the content that was made. They're virtual, they're not real characters, but yet we could get involved in that way that only live performers could in the past. And then so we now do mocap, and then there's markerless mocap detection, so all that data's coming in as well, taking that information, it's AI empowered, and that's again assisting the acting, and it allows us to place characters in space and update the way they perform and things like that. So it really is moving in, fragmenting and changing into very different directions. So a very exciting time, but quite tumultuous one as well.
I want to come back to that, some of that excitement, but first, for completeness, in games, George, what would you say?
Huge changes. So if you compare the experience of playing games like 15, 20 years ago, you'd go to a shop, you'd buy a cartridge or a CD, put it in and play, in your room alone, or maybe, as a couch co-op with your brother or family or whatever. That has changed completely, and that has changed the business of games as well. So now, of course, the games can be delivered digitally. Then multiplayer is much bigger. There's much bigger emphasis on multiplayer and social aspects, so playing with people online. And also the monetization has changed. Now games on mobile are all free to play, and then it's actually monetized through microtransactions enabled by mobile payments, by all this kind of stuff wasn't there before, essentially. So that has changed in a big way. And the most recent is, of course, the AI, generative AI tools. That is changing also the way that companies are operating, and not just from the business perspective, the finance as well, but also now it's finding its way in creative aspects as well. And there is, interestingly, we did the survey with GDC, the Game Developer Conference, and we found that 50% of developers that we surveyed, they said that they have been using AI tools one way or another. However, 80% of them said that they had some concerns about what that would mean for the future of their roles as a creative person in the video game company. So that raises all sorts of questions as well.
And I think, just like Alex, I wanted to ask you, that all raising questions, it feels like we're changing so fast nowadays that we need ourselves to keep up to that change, let alone our customers. So we need to go and talk to them and say things. So how do you keep up? Are you even trying to keep up to that level of change? Or what's your strategy with so many things happening out there, changing our roles, changing what we do?
It can be quite overwhelming. I remember the last speaker, she mentioned, we can be like, oh, I can't keep up with this. You feel like you're chasing something new because there's a new tool, a new technique, and I can't possibly go into every one. I think, luckily, because of the nature of the work I do, it kind of gets shaped by the project that we're making. We still look at it from a value point of view. So whilst there's a new tool, and we know there's always going to be a spike of interest, because obviously campaign lab's nothing more than a digital first. But if we can find value for the audience, we're very much about what would the audience get from this, what do they get back, what is the value for them, what's the exchange. And then that helps us evaluate better in which way to sort of move our response. So that helps us filter.
And Dave, your consumers or your customers, as you say, they're more business side. Are they keeping up with you on all?
Yeah, I mean, I guess one of the reasons InfoBip exists, as aggregator, CPaaS provider, verticalized SaaS solutions provider. Ultimately, our role is to operate as a buffer between to soften the complexity or to introduce a layer to reduce the impact on our customers. But ultimately, as we see business model changes, introduction of more conversational behaviors, that's not something you can just adapt with a new API, right? There needs to be changes on client side to support those, whether that be operationally, whether that be technically, absolutely. And it's something that generally it's always problematic because any enterprise to make a change of that scale ultimately needs a business case. And in order to generate a business case, you need proof points. In order to generate proof points, you need to support the proof of concepts, etc. So ultimately, it's a kind of a long-term process. I think we're going to see absolutely early leaders jumping in and taking advantage of some of these advantages, but we will absolutely see a long tail that comes in many years.
Mm-hmm. I think it almost sounds like there's a bit of education happening there. Web buffer zone, you help them to solve it and tell them how it's doing. Almost, I shouldn't probably ask George because I suspect you're going to tell, yes, so complex, you should all become a subscriber of Omdia. But seriously, how do people keep up in the gaming industry? We've heard from Marina on the AI side and say openly and candidly, she said, I can't keep up with everything that's happening in AI right now. Mm-hmm. So can people keep up with everything that's happening in AI, AR, VR, in games?
So there's always two perspectives. There's a consumer perspective, I guess, and then
Sure.
and there's a business industry perspective. So from the consumer perspective, I would say they don't have to really think about this stuff in a way that I think people behind the games do, in that usually the games experiences are provided for them, and if AI or whatever technologies we're talking about is working well, they're not even going to think about that as a thing that they need to concern themselves in a way. That's of course very different for people who are behind the scenes and actually making games and making these perspectives, and they do have to make these big decisions internally in terms of, right, what's our stance on using ChatGPT to correct our code in the game, and what are the implications of that potentially. So these are type of things, many of them I think are kind of burying their heads in the sand and kind of saying, hopefully this will go away, but I think we all know that it's not going to go away just because the utility of it is so high. So what I would say is that, from my perspective, observing the market, and I mentioned those stats about how 50% of the game developers that we surveyed are using AI in some form. But at the moment, we find that the departments that have adopted it the quickest have been the business, marketing, finance. So those have been a bit more receptive to AI as a kind of a tool that they can use. Creatives, I feel like, I don't know, maybe Alex, you can shine more light on this, but I feel like based on the data that we have available, creators are a bit more cautious, as I mentioned earlier, about it, and there's more deliberation going on from their perspective.
I'd say there's a natural cautiousness. The GAI is stepping with a very big foot right in to the heart and soul of, like, if there's a whole ArtStation thing going on,
Yeah.
but a legal fight about what it was trained on, and that work coming out there. I mean, we're taking a very pragmatic view that, well, we can't fight against this, but yet we support that community at the same time. In truth, pragmatically, it's still quite unreliable. The Sora that came out was mind-blowing just the other week. So it's like, okay, the speed, so we know it's coming, and the curve's even faster than I thought on that. But consistency has been one of those problems, and obviously, and also like controlling camera angles, etc. But they are problems being solved. So I think the timeline on that is very soon. We need to be good collaborators. I think it creates new and interesting. So we've got some people working with machine learning in in the studio and exploring the different tool sets, because we still have to tell a story. We still have to plant a narrative in there. I don't think it's not ready for everything to be just put in like that. I think people are going to want human stories because we're humans. It doesn't mean AI is not part of that journey, but we care about things that matter to us, and that's still quite a thick, knotty subject. So I think we can embrace it in a very interesting manner.
Yeah, fine. But it's interesting. In my view, I always look at the creative industries or industries right now as because even the business side, you're becoming very creative. And this kind of flair, fantastic thing, ability to come up with new ideas. Now you have to do that, manage technological change, and reinvent your business at the same time. You are all very, very busy. So I'll keep an eye on time as well, given all of that. And it's probably time to also check if you have any questions around there for these gentlemen. If they're not, because they've done such a good job, well, we'll go and ask you one very little time, but one very fast question then for all of you. Okay, future of mobile. Crystal ball's out. What is going to happen in your industry, do you think? Next, what started from George?
Yeah, I'll start. I think a really interesting topic is the... I know it's so interesting. Regulation is so interesting.
For somebody like you, for the analyst in the house, very interesting, yes.
Obviously, Digital Markets Act, DMA, and everything that's happening in US in terms of app stores, and Apple starting to open up their app store or rather their platform for other app stores. So at the moment, of course, iOS has been only dominated, but Apple App Store was the only app store you could reuse legally. So now that's going to change. You're going to have potentially, Microsoft have said that they're going to make a move there. You're going to have Epic Games, company behind Fortnite, launching their own app store. So basically, in short, potentially more competition in this space, and it's going to take some time. But I think that's one space to watch, because there's going to be more competition in things like payments, in access, in content. So that's one. I think that's one thing I think is worth watching.
And it is exciting. Once you put it like that, it's very exciting. And Alex, what would you imagine in your business is going to happen?
In our business, it was quite interesting when I thought about the question, you say the future of mobile. When we think about mobiles, we automatically think of handsets, don't you? You just kind of do. So I'd actually say, think headset.
Oh, yeah.
Whatever we can do in our mobile, there's absolutely no reason why we won't be wearing it on our face, using voice and hand and gestures. It's not really this thing in my pocket that we got into mobile communications for. It's to be mobile, and that will continue to allow us to be mobile. So for us working that space, it's going to be spatialized experiences, spatial computing. It's super interesting. I'm working on some projects there, and we'll be walking inside our stories and things like that. It's happening. We'll be doing more and more work in that space.
More on that one. And what about Dave? Yeah,
but I think Marina touched on it earlier, actually, the humanization of experience and how AI supports that. Because I think there's a reason that VR headsets and glasses and Snap Lens hasn't picked up yet, and why I've only seen one person walking around with an Apple headset on so far in the last couple of days, because it's not as seamlessly integrated into humans' life, activities, behaviors, as it could and should be. Even taking it down to the nuts and bolts of conversational commerce, which we've all talked about for a long time, it's never really accelerated because it's a synchronous process. And as Marina touched on earlier, where you can jump from a user saying they want something to presenting them an option, a shortlist option of one or two things in one step, that would be an absolute game changer. And I think that the growth of messaging, you can't put me on a stage with a mic in front of people and me not reference RBM and where that's going to go and how that growth, particularly around the telecom-owned channels, I think that's going to become really interesting over coming years.
Well, I was going to say, I didn't expect it, but the three of them, you've all mentioned Apple in different ways, in terms of newsy articles in that way. But the future of mobile seems very rich and three different perspectives. Thank you very much. Probably that's all the time we have. We're just 5 seconds up. So I think I should really just do one thing then. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, and Jamila as well, that was here as well. as well as the Department for Business and Trade for the UK government. Thank you. Thanks, and we'll continue.